everybody. I'm Louisa from Middlebury College, and first I really want to thank you all for inviting me and the conference organizers for organizing such a wonderful and stimulating set of days. This has been terrific. I'm trying to figure out how. I want to make sure folks can hear me. Is this going to catch on the? Is it okay? Okay, good. Okay. So I thought I would like us to start off today by watching a short video essay that I made entitled One Us and the Radical Expansion of GIF Sets and Stage Mixes. This sort of sets the stage for some of the ideas that I'll be talking about and unpacking. There's a lot in this short little video. So I'll unpack some of the ideas and then kind of take them in new directions and think about how they connect to the themes that we've been exploring and will be continued to explore in the colloquium. And then finally I'm going to consider how fan creative forms in social media are being impacted now by recent changes, most especially Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter and transformation into X and the various policy and structural changes that have taken place because of that. So that's where we're headed in the long arc of the talk. Okay, but first, let's watch my video essay.
The music video Sing Sent by the K-pop group One Us. Let's watch it again. This moment, these details, these colors, this meaning. This is what GIF sets do. GIF sets function as analysis, compression, expansion. They explore the linearity of a music video to open up each moment so that we can stay within it for longer, forever if we wanted. And then each moment is juxtaposed against the movements and meanings of other moments. And we could stay in those too, at the same time or less. And a linear track that holds them together, the music. It's not present, except for perhaps how we bring the music non-linearly in our heads to experience the GIF set. GIF sets are capable of holding all these meanings and feelings at once, and we decode them without necessarily even stopping to think about the complexity involved. But we do take in the complexity involved. GIF sets embody what I see as a key dynamic of fandom. Analysis as affect. Affect as analysis. But are GIF sets a dying breed hanging on by a thread in an ever-shifting Tumblr ecosystem? What about GIFs on Twitter, which tend to be more single images, or at least less crafted juxtapositions? But this is perhaps a question for another video. In contrast to GIF sets, stage mix videos, where editors stitch together multiple performances of a single song, reunify, while at the same time they fragment. Official music videos switch from outfit to outfit while keeping the flow of choreography and or story and the linear flow of music. the single captured performance, notable for its live continuity. In contrast to these two officially produced types of video, fan-made stage mixes unite multiple performance videos through seamless editing to simultaneously maintain linearity and wholeness and the multiplicity of all performances, brought together in a sort of meta whole that stands outside of a single time and space. This is what always amazes and inspires me about fan engagement and authorship. It disrupts, no, it implodes or undermines or reveals to be totally false basic assumed cultural dichotomies: originality versus derivation, emotion versus analysis, even singularity versus multiplicity. GIF sets and stage mixes, both in their own ways, evade all of these dichotomies. Showing that our experiences of popular media culture are so much more nuanced, meaningful, and even sublime than we perhaps give them credit for.
Okay, thank you for experiencing that. That was kind of an exciting moment for me. It's the first time that's played on a big screen. Sorry if the sound was a little wonky and I couldn't help but snap a couple pictures. This was actually the first video essay I had ever made. And you see, it comes from a more innocent time, back when Tumblr was the site in question, not Twitter. We didn't know where folks were going to go after Tumblr fell apart. And also when OneUs was a 6-member group rather than the now post-scandal 5. But still, as with all things in fandom and social media, fandom's practices adapt and they move forward, and that's basically where we're going to start today. So let's begin by talking about GIF sets. Do I need to be standing right here for folks to hear me, or is it, no, it's okay if I'm here? Okay, good, because my notes are here. GIF sets are a fan form that developed specifically on Tumblr. Tumblr allows users to post a collection of images in a specific order and alignment. The resulting post then shows the images juxtaposed, separated from each other via those white border lines, creating the overall impression of an aesthetic collage, with the images offered to the viewers in simultaneous juxtaposition. The images in a GIF set don't stand on their own, right? They have these accompanying hashtags and notes written by both the creator and the viewers. And it's a sort of, they become multimodal media texts in that way. And the tags and comments often, as you can see in this example, combine affect with interpretation, and as I talk about in the video essay, challenging cultural assumptions about the divide between emotion and analysis. This artistic form of the GIF set has very much been informed by the affordances of Tumblr. As a form, the GIF set is not something easily replicable in other online platforms. My colleague at Middlebury College, Jason Mattel, tried to make something akin to a GIF set on WordPress and on Adobe Premiere a few years back as part of a video graphic project on deforming Singin' in the Rain. So the result was fascinating, and it led him to valuable insights about Singin' in the Rain as a film, but the GIF sets themselves really didn't quite have the same feel or effect as the GIF sets that proliferate on Tumblr and that folks are familiar with on Tumblr. The separating dividers, this is the Premiere version, between the images were either wider or narrower than on Tumblr, and somehow that threw off the specific familiar visual language of Tumblr GIF sets. Now, you could on Premiere, not so much on WordPress, you could try to more closely approximate the Tumblr structure, but that would be really going out of your way to recreate a visual form that Tumblr kind of automates, and the reason we have come to it is because Tumblr automates it. So yes, GIF sets emerged in a large part from this invitation to create posts with multiple GIFs within Tumblr. The platform offers this as a primary creative form, right? The way it distinguished itself was that it was primarily visual compared to, at the time, the more text-based limited Twitter. So that's not to say that fans creating GIF sets are just kind of rule following and doing what Tumblr tells them to do. Rather, they're working with a palette and a set of tools offered by Tumblr and exploring the ways in which they can use it aesthetically, and sometimes deploying elements that Tumblr wants you to use one way in another way. For example, here it says add tags to help people find your post, and anyone who has used Tumblr knows that tags do not help anyone find any posts. The organizational structure is terrible, and tags are more often used for this kind of effusive commentary or to situate yourself within a cultural conversation. So when you upload images to create a GIF set on Tumblr, as I did, I need to move on to the next one. As I did here, I never actually posted this, but it's an example for us today. You see them in preview juxtaposed against one another, so you can see what the collective form and the collage is going to look like. So that's how you see it within the app when you're posting, or on the computer when you're posting. But when you actually are then coming to a posted GIF set, you can either see it in this way, but you can click in and see the individual images as well. And it's this kind of, and I demonstrated that in certain moments of the video essay. And it's this kind of flexibility, this notion that the images exist on their own, but also in conversation with each other in collective, that I think really defines the form and function of the Tumblr GIF set. But interface limitations are not the only constraints that shape GIF sets. Indeed, cultural conversations, emerging sort of aesthetic debates about what makes a good and compelling GIF set also shape GIF sets, right? And some of that might be less explicit, like folks just, what GIF set gets a lot of attention, right? Or people copying certain styles of other GIF sets just because they find them appealing. But in other cases, it's more explicitly laid out in tutorials, or like in this example, which is in an ask in Tumblr, but this person says, the most important thing in making any GIF set is to make it look like all the GIFs belong and that they look the same. So there's a value being conveyed here of like a uniformity of aesthetic, a collective unifying visual feel. And you could imagine that people could make GIF sets with very different approaches, but this was, at this moment in time, the kind of cultural artistic discourses circulating around GIF sets and informing GIF sets on Tumblr. Oops, that won't work. Okay. So back in 2009, in our essay, Limit Play, Fan Authorship Between Source Text, Intertext, and Context, Christina Busa and I argue that, quote, contemporary fan artistic creation is directly dependent on the digital tools which fans use to create, publish, and view these artworks, and that these art forms are shaped by the intersection of the limitations of interface, fandom discourse, and larger cultural influences. So one of the case studies we explored in this context was the LiveJournal user icon. You may remember LiveJournal? People here, anyone remember LiveJournal? Not too many hands. Okay, so it was, I feel old, a blogging tool popular among many media fans from 2000 to 2017. I mean, that's not that long ago. One of the first, but time, I guess it feels like another lifetime. One of the first things that you did when joining LiveJournal, as a fan at least back in the early 2000s, was to choose and upload a user icon, a 100 by 100 pixel user picture that was specifically requested by the LiveJournal interface, and it had to be 100 by 100 pixels. Like you couldn't upload something else the way you can now and it will sort of shrink it down. No, had to be 100 by 100 pixels. So it had to be made intentionally for this purpose. But though LiveJournal's only requirement for its user icon was this pixel size, LiveJournal user icons developed, as Christina Busa and I put it back then, specific social uses and aesthetic trends within their fandom. Fans put LiveJournal user icons to quite personal use to communicate their identity, their investment in particular commercial media texts, and their alignment with particular fandom communities and subcommunities. Though they were not moving images, I'd like to take a few minutes to delve into the history of the LiveJournal user icon, because I think that LJ icon usage presaged the use of GIF sets and then loop videos in later fan social media use. LiveJournal user icons were a diverse and flourishing art form, built within the restrictions of this 100 by 100 pixel canvas dictated by LiveJournal. Within that significant restriction of pixels and canvas, fans created icons with a wide range of aesthetics and developed whole communities dedicated to sharing icons. Specific icon artists developed aesthetics distinctive to them, but then at the same time there were a few notable aesthetic trends, what we could perhaps even think of as fan artistic movements, that evolved during LiveJournal's reign as a fandom center. User icons thus represented aesthetic movements and fans' personal senses of identity. Specific user icons came to represent individual fans within fandom spaces and became their face the way fellow fans recognized them. LiveJournal user icons spanned a wide range of fandoms and aesthetics and had both utilitarian and deeply personal use. They were dictated by the platform, shaped by the fan community and individual preferences, and accompanied by LiveJournal user posts, whether they were sharing fan fiction, media interpretation, or personal narratives, thoughts, and feelings. So now for a little personal anecdote. At around the height of LiveJournal's fandom dominance and the omnipresence of icons as a fan art form, I went to Venice for the first time. And one of the many memorable experiences we had was our visit to the Museum of Icons, which focused not on LiveJournal user icons, obviously, but on Byzantine and post-Byzantine icons. Though Byzantine icons were not limited to 100 by 100 pixels, I could not help but think of the similarities between icons and the fan art form, both because both of them flattened and layered aesthetics, and because of the personal and emotional yet collective function of these images. The way they functioned as shared cultural imagery, but were also used in deeply individual, intimate ways. But even as I saw the similarities, or especially as I saw them, I felt acutely the likelihood that the fan form of the icon would not be archived, researched, and showcased in a museum like the Museum of Icons. And indeed, many, many LiveJournal icons are gone now, a prolific art form mostly lost to the ephemerality of social media. Some icons do still exist on LiveJournal, even some of the early ones, and this is an example of some of those, and you can still upload them as before, so a remnant of the experience is still possible on LiveJournal. It's not gone entirely. And a fuller experience of the forum and its social uses continues on the fan-created LiveJournal offshoot, Dreamwidth, but at a much smaller scale because it's a much more niche community. But overall, the reign of the LiveJournal icon as a dominant fan art form has passed. In her video essay, The Life and Death of Fandom Platforms, Casey Feisler talks about the fanish migration from LiveJournal to Archive of Our Own and Tumblr to, as she puts it, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. She posted this video essay in 2020 when it wasn't yet clear where fans would migrate to as Tumblr waned. Now, in 2023, we're in a position to fill in those question marks, although we're at another period of transition, and so we can ask a similar question now. As the dust cleared after the fan flight from Tumblr in 2019-2020 due to a not safe for work purge, this connects to Jenny's keynote yesterday, and the continued shifts in ownership, policies, and management, fan communities found themselves primarily on Twitter, though some fans and fandoms returned to Dreamwidth, embraced Reddit, which that was a huge move because at that point Reddit was perceived as very sort of not fan or female culture friendly, but it changed and became a fandom space. Or they remained with Tumblr despite the corporate and policy shifts. The move from LiveJournal to Tumblr to Twitter shaped fan communities in a myriad of ways, not least that Twitter was a highly internationally used tool, and this coincided with increased access to media from other countries via streaming services, again, looking to some of the talks we heard yesterday afternoon especially. And so multilingual and transnational fandoms grew and flourished on Twitter, most visibly fans of anime, K-pop, and Korean dramas. Where on LiveJournal and Tumblr, media fans had mostly been siloed by language. Now fans from different countries and speaking different languages interacted more, especially with the deployment of the the translate tweet function on Twitter. In her video essay, Casey Feisler argues that fandom is technology agnostic and that platforms will rise and fall, but fandom will outlive all of them. I'm not really sure why she didn't go with the rhyme, will outlive them all, but anyway. Her point is, of course, to say that fandom will be around no matter what platforms and hardwares come and go, but perhaps it would be more correct to say the existence of fandom is technology agnostic, because interface affordances and limitations shape fandom communities and fan works, and fans will at the very least complain vociferously if things change, and in certain instances move platforms as a result. And as they do, fan forms of creativity will change and some will disappear because they were dependent on specific technologies and interfaces. This then is a story of fan social media migrations and a story of changing fan art forms, or rather, the two are interlinked. If fans change platforms, fanish art forms must evolve and change. New forms take shape and old ones fall into obscurity. Or if fans are deeply invested in the affordances of a platform and the art forms they foster, they may not change platforms at all, or at least not as quickly as one would expect. For example, we can look at the decentering of the user icon as a nuanced aesthetic form. On Twitter and Tumblr, on the left is Tumblr and on the right is Twitter, user icons are still important. They still represent users with every post they make. But because they're so much smaller in how they appear within the Twitter interface, the nuance and complexity of the LiveJournal Dreamwidth icons aesthetically are not only lost, but would work against the impact of user icons on Twitter, which tend to be simpler, striking, and easily recognizable. Gone is the use of multiple layers of text crafted on Photoshop and texture, and thus gone are the communities and tutorials devoted to the craft and evolving school of icon aesthetics. Likewise, Tumblr GIF sets did not carry over as a dominant art form on Twitter when fans fled from Tumblr to Twitter. While you can upload multiple images to Twitter, the results are palpably different to Tumblr. They may mimic to a certain degree the feel of Tumblr GIF sets, but within different limits and to different effect. Indeed, the interface of Twitter did not permit users to upload multiple moving images or a combination of still and moving images defining aspects of the Tumblr GIF set until 2022, so very recently. In the place of GIF sets, other fan art forms rose to the fore on Twitter, ones more encouraged by the interface than the unsatisfactory mimicking of a Tumblr GIF set. So I'm going to turn now to consider one such art form prevalent on Twitter, the video loop, which I'd argue is or was Twitter fandom's answer to icons and GIF sets. So loops are animated GIFs or very short moments of video. They became a possibility in 2017 on Twitter when Twitter introduced automatically looping short video to capitalize on the short form video market as the micro video sharing site Vine closed down. So there's another intersection of different platforms shaping fan creativity. As with GIFs in Tumblr GIF sets, loops capture a single moment in time and replay it over and over again. Compared to Tumblr GIF sets, the general ethos is not so much one of poetic collage as one of focused play, pleasure, and or analysis. most loops are single images, theoretically repeating in perpetuity. With their emphasis on the singular, often circular repetition of movements, loops are about the spectacle of moving imagery, akin to the spectacle-driven, non-narrative experience of early cinema, what Tom Gunning termed the cinema of attractions. This GIF got kind of squished, and I'm not sure why, but I still got to get Buster Keaton, my beloved, in this. So yes, at the same time, as they function as this type of return to spectacle, loops function as the sites of personal emotion and shared experience of emotion. This fragmented infinite looping allows for suspended engagement with the ephemeral and the momentary, be it beautiful or mundane, and this highly personal engagement is also collective, both within and beyond fandom. Oh, maybe I have to click on these. Oh, no. Oh. Well, there you go. There's one. For some reason, I didn't load that up in the keynote. Okay. You get the idea. I'll show you this one too. There's some parallels there. Okay. So at the same time, these loops function as sites of personal emotion and shared experience of fandom. And so it's both, I hope that kind of showed how it's both collective, connecting to sort of cat video culture, right? And then specific to sub-communities and individuals, as like a K-pop idol who is associated with having cat-like behaviors is sort of shown in a similar, spectacular, adorable way. So writing about memes on Tumblr, J.S.A. Lowe described the collective contextualized understanding of fandom meme images as sophisticated inside jokes that depend on the contextualized understanding of the fandom meme image, as depend on intimate knowledge and the laughter of the group. Fandom engagement with loops on Twitter, this is really supposed to be about this page. Oh well, there we go. With loops on Twitter are likewise both the emotion, laughter, or otherwise of a group and the result of intimate knowledge of context, be it the context of the image's specific original source or the context of community reception, the shared knowledge of the way a loop is meant to be read. So like the second loop of Junji from Only One Of, that's meant for a community of people who know how to read that loop. The community of people who know how to read Cat with Vibes is much broader, but still we are trained in a certain way of reading that even as we experience it individually. Loops offer a deep dive into a micro moment, and the growth of loops as a fanish art form on Twitter coincided with fan discourse about micro expressions. Fans started adopting this pop psychological notion of micro expressions to laud the skill of actors to convey nuance with only subtle changes in their facial muscles or eye expression, and also to delve into close readings of characters' psyches and motivation. Loops offer a deep dive into a micro moment. Indeed, the growth of loops as a fanish art form on Twitter coincided with Loops allow this endless study of minor details of expression to unpack meaning, facilitating discussion of fictional characters, or as in this case, offering a sense of closeness or perhaps just the presence of idols or beloved characters with all of their idiosyncrasies and humanness, be they real or fictional. Video loops trade in this emotional intimacy, in collective analysis, and in a visual language of desire. In her dissertation on Tumblr, Kate Braun describes looping GIFs as follows: by removing their original context and adding perpetual repetition of a single action, GIF loops become atemporal. The emotive performance is fleetingly infinite, only ending when the user moves on to the next post, yet ostensibly existing forever online in an endless repeating moment. End quote. So there's an interpolation of sorts here, as fan emotions and point of view are sutured onto these short moments of looping video, which are then sewed into the larger flow of their Twitter experience. Thus, fandom loops implode yet another assumed dichotomy between, on the one hand, the cinema of attractions and collective audience experience of early cinema, and on the other, the structures of evolved point of view editing and the spectator's gaze of desire and of narrative interpretation, a la Laura Mulvey, and all of the kind of popularized gaze theory that has, male gaze theory that has followed that. So now I'd like to turn to a case study of sorts, looking at the very recent reception of Twitter, or rather X, of a concept film released for the K-pop group ENHYPEN on October 16th, 2023, so just a couple weeks ago, in advance of their forthcoming album, Orange Blood. So a little bit of background. For those of you unfamiliar with K-pop, K-pop groups often have narratives which extend from album to album to album, and they're often kind of fantasy-driven and mythic and full of little details that are unpacked not only in their music and music videos, but also in like extra texts, like concept films, trailers, or even like the packaging that comes with albums, like there'll be maps in there or something, right? So the lore is often very extensive, and it's something you don't have to engage with, but that many fans do. So the group ENHYPEN has a very complex and far-reaching lore, which I'm going to summarize very quickly. Wait, this took me a while, so I'm going to read this part. They were royal knights who were turned into vampires and then sent to the future where they've lost their memories. I was condensing a lot. So each new album extends this lore and explores the themes within it. And so when a new album or new material is released, fans are excited for the new music and the videos, but also for the expansion of the lore. And of course, one of the ways that fans engage with this new material is through GIF sets and loops. So first, I want us to watch a minute or two of the concept film just to see what fans are working with in this case, and then we'll look at fan creative response to this concept film through GIFs and loops. Okay, so we'll stop there. It's a 6-minute film that basically shows the story of one of the members waking up and not being a vampire, and spoiler, then at the end it was just a dream. But it has this sort of this moment of escapist humanity and idealism that hopefully you got the sense of that, which I think like meshes nicely with looking at what the fans did with the loops. So as I mentioned earlier, in 2022, Twitter did introduce the ability to upload multiple moving images to a single post, But by that point, singular loops had taken on a life of their own as an art form. However, recently, fans have begun to use the affordance of multiple images and multiple moving images to shape new art forms reminiscent of Tumblr's GIF sets, but with enough distance now, with their own aesthetics qualities, and these newly reconfigured GIF sets now coincide along loops. So here's an example of that for a fan-created response to the Orange Blood trailer, which has many more images than you would expect to see in a Tumblr GIF set, resulting in a kind of tile-like juxtaposition, and it's quite expansive. It invites a more holistic, almost meta consideration of the aesthetics and visual patterns of the concept film, and in a sense it functions as a data visualization of the color palette and mise en scène in relation to the lore's themes, if you can see that in the flow of this image. Here's another example of a post that takes advantage of Twitter's recent affordances allowing multimedia posts. So instead of the religious user icons, we have a multimedia triptych that combines still and moving imagery to bring us inside a moment of performance, character, and also the poster's experience of that moment with the accompanying "oh my god" text. Now, most of the visual posts responding to the Orange Blood concept film are actually singular loop images, or sometimes double images. Many of these video loops function as shared moments of collective analysis. However, the analysis is not always in the loop itself, but in the accompanying text, where the loop exists alongside as a sort of shared touchstone and experience. So here's an example of that, this captured moment where we return to the vampire narrative, but in the text there is some explanation of the lore for fans who don't know the lore in the context. So these loops function as an audiovisual poetics of time, both the time captured within the looping image itself and the time of the shared release of the concept trailer on YouTube, and also the time people spend watching the loops themselves. They'll cluster together as you're looking on Twitter, and everyone is experiencing all of these loops in a big rush after the concept film has been shown. These loops thus exist as a shared experience of emotional time, whether they exist alongside analysis or as analysis themselves, or as articulations of individual and shared desire. These shared moments of media experience function as endlessly repeating fragments that connect fans in a new moment of time. Such loops of attraction, desire, and analysis appear interspersed with user posts and other content, but also clustered in moments of collective reception. But I'd argue that within this dispersed poetics of shared fragments of time, they function as both living room viewing and water cooler post-media conversation at once, to draw on previous discourse about television viewing. But I've been talking about Twitter as if it still exists, and of course it doesn't. Now it's Elon Musk's X. Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter and subsequent policy changes impacted fans on Twitter in a variety of ways. One key change relevant to us here is that Musk's elimination of bots meant that the many dedicated loop accounts could no longer produce content at the same rate as before. Many loop accounts were bots that would post several times a day. But the integration of loops into the daily flow of content and the key role that they played as spectacle, identification, and affect persists. Indeed, I'd argue that this is one of the many reasons that fans have stayed with Twitter, now X, as the digital world seems to burn down around them. At the same time, the way in which these loops function and what they offer within Twitter, or X, may be shifting somewhat, as loops increasingly punctuate the growing circulation of disturbing news content, offering a possible therapeutic outlet for escape, and yet one which people doom scroll through, or which fans tell other fans not to post in the face of unfolding global events. So Twitter might be a dumpster fire, but some fans and fan communities are holding on for dear life because of the intimate affordances of the forms that have taken shape there, even when Twitter is no longer Twitter and fans perceive themselves as squatters in a hostile environment. If interface affordances like Google Translate and the ability to share video loops play such a key role in fan community experience, self-definition, and creative forms, people will stay in a platform as it changes radically in other ways, as long as it still allows those particular forms of community and creativity. Now, while many fans have stayed on Twitter, so far at least, some fans have moved on to alternatives, Blue Sky, Threads, or Mastodon. However, these fledgling social media tools do not have the same affordances as Twitter. For one, they do not yet allow the posting of small fragments of video. At the moment, Threads seems to be a total non-starter for fandom, and we could discuss why in the Q&A. But some communities are moving to Blue Sky, including my own communities to a degree. The fans moving to Blue Sky so far seem to be older and have seen more transitions from interface to interface and the changes inherent in those shifts. While we might think that younger fans would be willing to experiment with and embrace new platforms, in fact, it seems to be the older users who feel that they can pick up and move their digital homes and forge new forms in the process, or reimagine older forms of creativity. Indeed, these fans on Blue Sky are nostalgically returning to the single image, which is available to them, as in this call for bringing back the art of the reaction pic. We may see a reworking of this older form into a new form among the fans of Blue Sky, but the tipping point will only come when young people, younger generations of fans and non-fans, embrace the affordances of the new spaces and innovate new forms within them. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa, for this wonderful presentation. We can take the question now. Et donc, est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans la salle?
Hello, is it working? I can just speak loud too.
Les personnes ne sont vraiment pas entendre alors
Okay, so I'm not a scholar yet. I'm in university in general. I was interested because you talked about like K-pop and like the loop video, but I was wondering more about the origin, because for me it's a lot of a simping community, to use a bit of a degrading like word in a sense. Do you find an origin to like this particular form of content? Because the loop, as you said, isn't temporal, but it's also like a kind of obsession content because you can watch it over and over again. So I was wondering what you thought about the origin of this particular form of content.
Sure. I think that it's the intersection of a variety of different influences and histories. Within K-pop specifically, I would say the origin would probably be the fan cam. Back when fan cams really, I mean, they still are to a degree, but were really taken by people within concerts and then circulated so that other people could see the concerts, and they would be sort of short snippets that could be shared online in terms of data, the amount of data. In terms of the eroticization of the image, which I think is kind of what you're getting at, I feel like that has a long history, not just within K-pop, but within fandom as a kind of collective engagement with erotics and desire. That was very much present in still images, in the icons, in the user icons. I don't know if you saw in the examples, but they would often kind of cut up people's faces. You would only see body parts. So it was very much in the kind of Mulvian male gaze structure, except that's complicated by the fact that it was primarily female or queer fans engaging, and that the engagement was both like intimately personal and collective rather than sitting in a dark room. So I think that kind of, there's that engagement with the, I don't know if I want to call it obsession, but like the sort of the engaged eroticism and identification combined is a really key element of loops, and has a long history in still images before moving images, as well as in the way in which K-pop fandom offered a new form of moving image fan creation. I hope that answered your question a little bit.
It's a really interesting thesis for me, because it's a lot of my generation. I have a lot of friends that are K-pop fans, and I I've always been wondering with GIFs especially, and I've grew up with Tumblr as well, and I always found that, I mean, I'm a victim, I did the same thing younger, so I was just wondering if it came from that, but yeah, thank you a lot.
Yeah, I think it did, and the other thing I guess I want to say is that's a bit of what I was talking about, how this combines like spectacle and identification at once, and so I see GIFs imploding that dichotomy of it's simultaneously viewing as desire and identification and spectacle.
Should I go to the microphone? Or yeah? Okay, thanks. So this is a methodological question. I'm wondering if, well, I guess a few things. Do you interact with the fan communities? Like you mentioned at one point, you referred to it as like my communities. Are you a member? And if so, is your intervention, I'll try to stand back so a little less feedback. Is your intervention, do you directly ask your research questions? Are you just participating to gain entry? And if it's the case that you're actually just, doing an analysis and not making any interventions, are these communities ones that you do need to gain access to, or are they just like open, to anyone who would just observe them on the internet, in any of the various platforms? Like essentially, is this human subjects research, or are you doing like analysis of like content that could be found by anyone?
Sure, thank you. This is a long-standing kind of question and conversation within fan studies. I position myself as a fan scholar and a scholar fan, drawing on Alexander Doty's terminology, but Henry Jenkins also talked about the ACA fan as a position that merges these identities, and that requires you to be very self-aware of your privilege and yet to be aware of your embeddedness within the communities. And I am very much embedded in the communities, not in a for research way. I'm a full participant in those communities, and I'm a fan video maker. Like this video essay was the first video essay I had made that wasn't a fan vid in the forms of fan vids, which I've been making since 2000, or earlier. So I am fully a participant in the communities, and I tend to feel much more comfortable talking about the communities that I am part of. But at the same time, I, especially in a published essay, even if something is publicly available within fan studies, we practice certain methodological protections like in the Tumblr book that I was one of the co-editors for, we actually changed the language of the quotes so that people couldn't find their way, because Tumblr especially is a sort of space of intimate publics, where people treat it as very intimate because it's so hard to find anything, but yet at the same time it is public. So we had a lot of conversations, both as the editors of the book and there's 50 contributors to that book, of how to handle that. I think one of the shortfalls of this approach, of the fan scholar approach, that folks have been talking about quite a lot in fan studies now, is how that may limit what fandoms we talk about and what things we say about them. And so if folks want to say less than positive things about communities that maybe they don't want to situate themselves with, then that scholarship won't get written. Because my work tends to be more, I'm a media studies scholar and I'm more focused on the aesthetics. I don't really talk about the people. So I haven't considered, and I don't do interviews. I'm engaging with the texts that are very publicly available with large amounts of circulation. And even so, if I'm including somebody's video, I will ask for permission, but I don't consider it human subjects research in that way. In part, there's been a lot of debate within fan studies that the IRB, and of course this depends on context, but is really not made or suited for the type of work that fan studies does, and ends up being a real hindrance actually in people being able to do the valuable work that they need to do. But that means the ethical questions are sort of still on us, and we do talk about them a lot. There was a recent issue on method in the Journal of Transformative Works and Cultures, and a recent book collection that addressed those issues as well. And I have a piece in Transformative Works and Cultures from a couple years ago. It was an interview about my approach to felt scholarship, where I take my own perspective and emotion and kind of consider that an investment and consider that as part of what I'm engaging with and analyzing, and how I think it's valuable to stay away from notions of objectivity, and to own one's own subjectivity when engaging with this type of work. I hope that answers your question a little.
Thank you. I find it fascinating because I've been in like different fandoms through my life, and so it's really interesting to have this sort of presentation. One thing you mentioned at the very beginning in your video essays was the editing people were doing in those sort of fan videos. One thing I'm fascinated with GIFs or GIFs, I don't know. It's the way people interact with the narrative of shows, for example, and they can create a new editing with a GIF set. Like they can make links between scenes or even episodes, or just those different things. And I find it interesting because then people can engage with a sort of beginning of analysis or film analysis, and GIFs, I think they are able to bring that very easily to people and sort of vulgarizes the practice of film analysis. And I just wanted to hear you about this.
Sure, absolutely. So most of my current research, I'm co-editing. We're just in the beginning process, so if anybody's interested in submitting, please do a Routledge Companion on fan video and social media. And so I've thought a lot about how fan videos, which are longer, you can do more 2 to 3 minute fan videos, or even 1 minute fan videos, or 18-second edits, how they can serve as analysis and interpretation, and sort of introduction to, even the still image, multi-image, overview of how color was used is a sort of introduction, or could function as not even just an introduction, because sometimes it's very sophisticated analysis that fans do in these forms, be they GIF sets, edits, or fan videos. But increasingly, I've always thought about working, my own fan video is sort of critical fan video. That's why one of my usernames is fanvidcrit, to think of vidding work as academic criticism or analytic criticism. But the video essay itself has become popularized as a form. And fan video essays, that means created by fans for fans, then they can range anywhere from 7 hour long, there's a 7 hour long Pretty Liars video essay, to on TikTok, very short little video essays, to indeed GIF sets. So I see that as a movement. And I don't even want to say it's an introduction, because for people who are not in academia, it's simply an ongoing way of engaging analytically with the media culture around them. But it's usually analytic and emotionally, which I think we could learn from as academics. Thank you, it's a great question.
Thank you very much. And I took a lot of notes about something that could belong to affects and effects of these various practices. So I was wondering if regarding icons, the term and the examples really resonated, you could develop a little bit, linking it to the therapeutic culture you were talking about at the end. You said some of these practices could be considered as possible therapeutic outlet for escape, but
I was wondering if icons are still something that interest you, are still a thing today, and or if this changed over time, and if you could speculate a little bit more about the term icon, which goes for semioticians with the idea of resemblance, but also since you mentioned the Byzantine art, I was also thinking about the divine secrecy, or the idea of filter, or kind of a very queer distance which allows a lot of different interpretations. There was a great scholar and writer in Italy, Michela Murgia, who recently died, who wrote about queerness and in religion, specifically working on painting from a Russian painter who did icons, and she was amazed because all these characters represent the Trinity represented was all the roles were interchangeable. So she was fascinated by that, and she was like interpreting this as a queer example of. So I was wondering if there's something to say about this, in the fact that it's pretty hard to decipher an icon, maybe, and that could allow for a lot of very useful tools for in a difficult and uncertain life.
Yes, absolutely.
On platforms. Yeah.
What a great question, and I would love for you to send me the information for that essay. Let me first talk about LiveJournal user icons as they were used, because I think that's a sort of more obvious example, and I actually cut some stuff out of the talk for time that gets at this. So when you uploaded a user icon to LiveJournal, you actually were given 15 free to start, and then people could buy each other icons. More icons are free, like paid time that came with more icons. I think it was up to 50. As a gift, it was like a kind of gift to show appreciation for their work or their fan fiction, or just for your friend on their birthday, that sort of thing. And so you would have a default, and again, this was all structured by the interface. You'd have a default icon that would sort of come to represent you primarily, and then you'd have others that you would use for particular moods or engagements or participation in multiple communities. And as I said earlier, sometimes these icons, especially with the 100 by 100, but they were shown largely enough on the screen that they could have many layers, and there was definitely an aesthetics of obscuring and an erotics of obscuring that was predominant in certain aesthetic trends within user icons on LiveJournal and Dreamwidth, where it would just be someone's eye, or maybe their hat was covering, right? Or their arm. But if you were a fan, you would know of that source. You would know who it was. You might know where the source came from. The layers used might give you some cues about how both the creator of the icon and the person who is now using it is expressing themselves, what their investment is narratively or erotically or emotionally. And so it functioned as a code and a language. And indeed, you could code switch with all of the different icons if you had 15 or if you had 50. And people would also claim particular icons that were just theirs. Artists would say, these are up for claim. And you'd come in and say, I'm taking number 15, and it would get crossed off. And so that would be your very personal icon, but you would still shift. And there would be other people would have other similar icons. And if you were friends, you might have matching icons, right? So I think there was a lot of coding work that happened then. Now, as I said, both Twitter and Tumblr icons are much, much smaller, but they still certainly do signify self. People change them much less frequently because they're how people know each other on Twitter. It certainly still signifies something about you, but some of like you can't really just have a part of a shoulder and it's signified because it's so teeny. But what people do change is their names and descriptions, and they change those frequently, I think, and those work in similar ways, sometimes quite unintelligible to outsiders about, like it might just say stream orange blood, but it might also say living in Junji's hat, or I just made that up, but in a way that would just be intelligible to people engaging with that particular community. And people still do also match icons with their online partner as a way of signifying that type of of closeness. I hope that answers your question a little bit, in terms of the obscuring, and in terms of the relation to the erotics of, and that gets back to the question of this sort of return to the image